Food versus supplements for nutrition. At breakfast, one person quickly washes down a handful of colorful supplement pills with coffee, while another slowly enjoys a home-cooked meal full of vegetables, fish, and whole grains. Many of us have seen this contrast around us, or even switched between these two styles ourselves, depending on how busy life gets. Is it really better to get most of our nutrients from real food, or is it perfectly fine to rely on supplements as the main way to fill in the gaps? In this video, we present a 10-round, 20-turn debate where both sides argue on equal footing using scientific facts and real-world examples. Which approach is closer to your own way of thinking about health and nutrition? Share your stance in the comments. Now, let's get started.
I believe that, as a general principle, nutrients should be obtained from food rather than from supplements. Official reviews state that micronutrients should first be taken from a variety of foods, and that supplements should only be used to compensate when there is a proven or likely deficiency. Food contains not only vitamins and minerals, but also dietary fiber and hundreds of kinds of polyphenols and other compounds that are not included in most supplements. It is thought that this complex combination of components acts together to reduce the risk of chronic diseases in a way that cannot be reproduced by isolated nutrients in pill form.
I do not disagree that, in an ideal world, people would obtain nutrients from a diverse, balanced diet. However, in reality, billions of people worldwide are deficient in micronutrients, such as vitamin A, iron, zinc, and folate. Because of diets centered on ultra-processed foods and the constraints of busy lifestyles, even in high-income countries, deficiencies are not rare. Standard dose supplements are a rational tool to close this gap efficiently. Data also show that a substantial proportion of adults take some form of supplement, which suggests this is already part of real-world strategies rather than a theoretical option that can be ignored.
However, widespread use is not the same as proven benefit. Large, randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses have repeatedly shown that multivitamin use in generally healthy adults does not significantly reduce cancer, cardiovascular disease, or overall mortality. In fact, there are warnings that high-dose supplementation of antioxidant vitamins, such as beta-carotene, vitamin E, and vitamin A, can increase overall mortality or cancer risk in some groups. From this perspective, the casual attitude of just take a supplement and you're safe is dangerous. It can give people a false sense of security that is not supported by high-quality evidence.
I agree that there is little evidence for supplements as a kind of universal health insurance, and there are even examples of harm. But in specific situations, supplemental therapy has clearly demonstrated benefits, such as folic acid for preventing neural tube defects, iron and B12 for treating anemia, and vitamin D plus calcium for bone health in certain populations. Moreover, in patients with chronic conditions like diabetes or COPD, adding oral nutritional supplements can reduce complications and hospitalizations according to several analyses. Dismissing all of these cases as mere exceptions oversimplifies reality. It is more accurate to say that the effectiveness of supplements depends heavily on context and indication.
What I see as problematic is not the size of the supplement market or its specialized medical uses, but the mindset of relying on supplements as an everyday source of nutrition. Unlike medicines, in many countries, supplements can be sold without pre-marketing approval or rigorous evaluation of efficacy. There are reports of products that do not contain the labeled amount of ingredients and of health damage caused by excessive doses or contamination. Recently, long-term high-dose vitamin B6 has been associated with peripheral neuropathy, leading to stronger regulation in some countries. placing one's daily nutritional foundation in products with such uncertainty is not a wise risk management strategy.
On the other hand, food itself is far from uniformly safe and healthy. Processed foods high in salt, sugar, and trans fats are much more strongly associated with lifestyle-related diseases than typical dietary supplements. In addition, for multivitamins around recommended daily intakes, meta-analyses have shown no increase in overall mortality. As long as we use well-designed products at low to moderate doses, safety can be controlled to a reasonable degree. We should certainly strengthen regulation and quality control, but that is not a reason to deny supplementing nutrition with supplements as a legitimate option in itself.
The strength of obtaining nutrients from food is not limited to safety. Patterns of eating centered on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and fish are consistently associated across prospective cohort studies and intervention trials with reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and certain cancers. By contrast, there are many cases where providing the same nutrients as single-ingredient supplements fails to produce the expected preventative effects. This suggests that interactions among multiple components in foods, the processes of digestion and absorption, and the influence of dietary fiber and the matrix of the meal, all of which are difficult to reproduce in a pill, are fundamental to the health benefits of diet.
The question, though, is how far we can realistically reproduce that context of eating in real life. In low-income groups or urban food deserts, stable access to fresh vegetables and fish is difficult in the first place. There are also reviews showing that the bioavailability of some nutrients, such as beta-carotene, a precursor of vitamin A, and certain vitamins, is lower from plant foods, and that animal source foods or supplements can have higher absorption and utilization. Taking these environmental and physiological constraints into account, I think it is more practical to flexibly combine multiple tools, including supplements, rather than treating the principle of always from food as absolute.
From a behavioral science viewpoint, supplements can function as a kind of moral license. For supplements marketed for weight loss or cognitive enhancement, reviews have pointed out not only the lack of strong evidence of effect, but also the risk that they may lead people to downplay standard medical care or lifestyle improvements. If people neglect vegetable intake or exercise because they are taking multivitamins, that is clearly counterproductive. The message that it does not matter whether nutrients come from supplements or food risks strengthening this mistaken idea that pills can replace fundamental lifestyle habits.
Conversely, epidemiological observations show that supplement users tend to be more health conscious than non-users with better diets and exercise habits. In other words, what matters is not the capsule itself, but how it is positioned in a person's overall behavior. In sports nutrition, for example, there are systematic reviews on supplements like creatine and certain sports foods that can contribute to performance, and evidence-based choices are being discussed. If we marginalize supplements on principle because of behavioral risks, we may actually lose valuable opportunities to educate consumers about how to use them appropriately within a broader health strategy.
From a public health perspective, the key question is where to invest limited resources. Improving the food environment, reducing salt and sugar, and promoting whole grains and vegetables has been shown to have a large impact on disease prevention at the population level. Supplements, by contrast, are purchased individually out of pocket, and their quality is highly variable. Even for tackling micronutrient deficiencies, approaches that modify the food supply, such as grain fortification and biofortification, are often recommended. At the level of society as a whole, I think we should concentrate resources on a direction that makes everyday meals the foundation of nutrition, rather than on individualized supplementation.
But those very measures, grain fortification, iodized salt, and so on, are essentially supplements in the form of food. In impoverished regions and in emergency humanitarian settings, tablets and powdered supplements have played an indispensable role. Treating food fortification and individual supplements as fundamentally different categories is not consistent. It is more rational to select, according to context, the most cost-effective mode of nutrient delivery. The rigid dichotomy, nutrition equals food, supplements are exceptions, is, in my view, a policy stance that lacks flexibility in the face of diverse real-world situations.
We must not forget that eating means more than just nutrient intake. Culture, family relationships, and psychological satisfaction all influence the maintenance of healthy behaviors over the long term. A sustainable strategy is to improve cooking skills and access to healthy foods so that people can continue to eat in a way they find enjoyable and tasty while still being good for their health. A supplement-centered mindset reduces nutrition to numbers on a label and medicalizes the relationship between people and food too much. The main message of nutrition education should remain: improve the quality of your meals, not take more supplements.
Even so, in practice, there are many people who cannot eat enough even if they want to. Older adults with impaired chewing or reduced appetite, and post-operative or chronically ill patients whose energy needs cannot realistically be met by food alone are obvious examples. For such individuals, meta-analyses suggest that adding liquid oral nutrition products or high-energy, high-protein supplements can reduce complications and shorten hospital stays. We should certainly respect the cultural value of food, but using that argument to treat supplement-like nutritional interventions in clinical settings as second-class options may conflict with the best interests of patients.
I am not denying nutritional support in medical settings per se. The problem is that this very specific context is being exported uncritically into general self-care, resulting in simplistic messages like, as long as you drink protein shakes, your meals can be sloppy. Many expert reviews adopt the framework: nutrition should come from food, supplements are for topping up deficiencies, and I think this is appropriate not only scientifically, but also from the standpoint of risk communication. If we reverse the slogan to something like, as a rule, get your nutrition from supplements, managing problems such as overdose and interactions would become even more difficult in the general population.
At the same time, we should critically examine how well that standard line reflects the latest science. Beyond vitamins and minerals, research on nutraceuticals, using high concentrations of food-derived bioactive compounds such as polyphenols and omega-3 fatty acids, is progressing, and there is some evidence for their usefulness in the adjunctive management of chronic diseases. The fact that early trials of single vitamins were disappointing does not justify assuming that more sophisticated supplement strategies will always be inferior to food. To me, that attitude risks slowing scientific progress by clinging to an outdated hierarchy between diet and supplements.
Yet, many of those products are still at the stage of observational studies or small clinical trials, and unlike pharmaceuticals, they can reach the market without passing comparably strict regulatory scrutiny. Reviews of the history of supplement regulation repeatedly point out the gap between scientific evidence and marketing claims, and the number of supplements whose efficacy has been firmly demonstrated in large randomized trials remains limited. From the standpoint of evidence-based medicine, it is natural to say, unless the effect of a supplement is clearly established, prioritize improving the diet first. At present, I do not see sufficient grounds to let supplements take the leading role in routine nutrition.
I also value evidence-based practice. But that does not mean we must accept if you can't get it from food, give up as the conclusion. In reality, most people find it difficult to follow an ideal Mediterranean diet or traditional Japanese diet every single day. And in intervention studies, adherence to strict dietary patterns is often modest. By contrast, monitoring blood levels and precisely supplementing the nutrients that are actually lacking can be seen as a more individualized and modern approach. The message, only diet is legitimate, supplements are secondary, risks morally restricting this kind of flexible, data-driven practice.
Even taking all of that into account, I maintain the principled position that nutrients should be obtained from food rather than supplements. As public reviews repeatedly emphasize, nutrients are most effective when consumed in the form of foods, and it is appropriate to position supplements as auxiliary tools for clearly defined situations. Considering the risks of adverse events from high-dose supplements and the uncertainties in regulation and quality, I don't think we should compromise in messages to the general public on the line, meals first, supplements only when needed. I strongly argue that the main focus of nutrition policy and education must remain on improving the food environment and the quality of everyday diets.
I take the opposite view. Regarding that principle as absolute is itself problematic. In modern societies, living environments and disease patterns are diverse, and there are certainly nutritional needs that cannot realistically be met by diet alone. Research on nutraceuticals and oral nutritional support continues to advance, and there is ample room to position supplements as one of the central tools in nutritional strategies. The value judgment that food is the original, supplements are exceptions, is already historically and culturally biased. The next step, I believe, is to question that premise and to create a framework in which food and supplements are treated as options on the same level, allowing individuals and societies to choose the optimal combination for their specific circumstances.
This concludes our 10-round debate on whether nutrients should be obtained from food rather than from supplements. In your own daily life, do you lean more toward getting nutrition from real food, or do you see supplements as an equal partner? Share your thoughts and real experiences about food and supplements in the comments.